Hello whisky fans, so we've got another very special one here today, which is the brand new 11-year-old from the English Whisky Company. And the first thing I'm going to say about this one is that they have absolutely nailed the packaging and presentation on their whiskies these days. Lovely striking sort of dark yellow box, very tasteful label. You can actually see the distillery itself on the middle of the label. And they've decided to brand themselves as the English these days, and also a very nice age statement right in the middle there. This whisky is presented at 46%, and it doesn't actually say anywhere on the label or the box that I can see that this is non-chill filtered and natural colour, but I know that all previous English whisky bottlings have been, so I'd be really surprised if they've started to do that. But it's a little bit disappointing it's not on the label, but I'm sure that they haven't started doing anything underhanded there. So let's get right into it and see what the whisky is like. Another thing that I really like about this one is the really odd age statement of 11 years. Just so quirky. I don't think I can think of any other distillery that offers an age statement whisky at 11 years, usually either 10 or 12. I'm not sure what the reason for that age statement of 11 years was, but it's a nice little touch. So on the nose, one of the first things that really grabs you is a lovely sharp cider apple aroma. Mixed with that, you've also got a lot of sweet orange notes. It has to be said that there is a nice sweet vanilla there, not overpowering. As far as I know, this whisky is matured in bourbon casks. Judging by the colour, possibly a sherry cask got into the mix there. But I would say that this is a typical well-matured bourbon whisky. As with most whiskies from the English Whisky Company, I'm also getting lots of mineral barley notes on the nose as well. Lots of barley, grist, but not just gristiness, it's a hard mineral cereal note. There's a slight saltiness in there as well, slight salty dry oak. So on the palate, so I'm getting lots of sweet, juicy, tropical fruit notes, and again that very mineral cereal barley note. It's really nice when you get notes coming through from the barley itself. And you do tend to always get that with the English Whisky Company. As per the nose, there's also lots of sweet oranginess, and particularly a mix of baked apples and again the sharp cider apples that we saw on the nose. Towards the end of the palate, I'm getting some sweet caramel notes. I'm also getting something a bit more unusual. There is definitely a dry oak quality on the late palate towards the finish, and something a bit more interesting. There's a little bit of a funkiness there, and I'm not sure if that might be because there has been a small amount of sherry matured whisky gone into this, and there's a little bit of funk from a sherry cask, or it could actually even be a little bit of peated malt has gone into there as well, but there's definitely something giving it that little extra bit of depth and character. Not entirely sure whether I think it improves this whisky or it might have been better without, but it definitely adds a little bit more complexity. And as for the finish, it's definitely a medium long one with some sweet oranges, some rich sweet caramel and some dry oak, and also that slightly funky starchy note coming through. So I think English Whisky have done a really good job here. I've been following English Whisky for quite a while because it is my local distillery, and really pleased that they've added this whisky, because this isn't a special limited edition release. Has actually been promised to be part of the core range. So as far as I know, we should be able to get this available all year round for the foreseeable future. Now, the price for this one, I paid around £60, and that was direct from the distillery itself. And I think that price is a little high for an 11-year-old. But you have to remember that you're not only buying some really quality whisky when you buy this one. It's a distillery that believes in doing everything the proper way, traditional, but you're also supporting a new distillery. They haven't been around that long. They've been around since 2006. So your money's actually going to doing some good for the whisky industry as well when you invest in this one. You also have to think that with a lot of distilleries now, would you rather pay £60 for a cask finished no age statement whisky with very few details and possibly questionable quality, or would you rather buy this here, 11 years old, essentially a craft-produced whisky? So I'm not going to complain too much about the price on this one. I do actually think that it is worth the money. So what grade am I going to give this whisky? Very impressed with this one. Very pleased to see English whisky still around and keeping up the age statements. This is going to be a B+. Now, one thing that is interesting about this whisky, a lot of Scotch distilleries are talking about terroir these days and provenance, the effect of the place on the product. So if you have a Scotch distillery that has brininess from the sea or seaweed from the coastlines around the distillery, what do you get from an English whisky? Now, terroir can definitely apply to this whisky just as much as it can any Scotch, because the barley that goes into this whisky is sourced locally. Not only does Norfolk grow a lot of whisky for the English whisky distillery as well as the Scottish whisky distillery, but the English whisky use crisps, maltings, which is in Fakenham, which is also in Norfolk. So the barley is locally sourced wherever possible, grown in Norfolk, malted in Norfolk and distilled in Norfolk. As for notes that you can pick up in the whisky, like I mentioned before, there is that certain mineral quality to this. And that's something that I've noticed in English whisky right from the early days when they were putting out even 1 or 3 year old spirit, that mineral quality. And I do wonder if that comes not only from the malt, but possibly from the water itself. Because the English Whisky Company, St George's Distillery, they actually use mineral water from the Breckland Aquifer, which is below the distillery itself. And I wonder if that mineral water adds some of that mineral quality to the finished product. So aside from the barley, which is a well-known product of the Norfolk area, there is also that starchy quality, and that starchiness which blends in with the mineral quality really well, actually sometimes reminds me a little bit of potato, which is another thing that we grow lots of here in Norfolk. And you might think it sounds a bit silly that I'm suggesting that you can taste Norfolk potatoes in a Norfolk whisky, but is that really any more silly than tasting seaweed and brine in a Lafroig? It's all a bit of fun at the end of the day, really, but it is nice that you have all of these recognisable qualities in the whisky that tie it to the local area. So probably the other thing that people are going to be wondering with this whisky, being an English whisky, people are going to want to know, how does it compare to Scotch? How does it compare to the whiskies that they're used to drinking? And to be honest, I think it compares quite favourably. Now, I was tempted to compare this one to the recent Kilchoman release, because Kilchoman was founded in 2005, St George's Distillery founded in 2006, so the distilleries are at a similar point in their journey. But the Kilchoman release, for a start, is peated, it's cask strength, it's a very, very limited availability bottling, actually sold out in less than 5 minutes when it went on sale, so it's not going to be available year round as this one is. And also it's twice the price of this one. So I think that would be a little bit unfair. So instead, what I think would probably be a more fair comparison is the English whisky 11-year-old compared to something that a lot of you will be very familiar with, Old Pulteney 12-year-old. which has been rebranded recently. And when you compare the new English single malt with the Old Pulteney 12, it's a bit more apples to apples. So they're a very similar age, and I actually think that both distilleries have that little bit of a salty note in common between them. So how does the English compare to the Old Pulteney? I would actually say that the English 11-year-old shows a little bit more maturity than the Old Pulteney 12, and better than that, I would say that the English whisky has quite a lot more complexity compared to the Old Pulteney 12-year-old. Apart from that, there's a lot of similarities, really. They're both quite salty, as I said, and both got a nice orangey sweetness to them. And they both highlight the qualities of the malt in their whisky. And that's really a credit to the English Whisky Company, that after only being open for around 14 years, they're already in the runnings with companies like Old Pulteney that have been around for much longer. If anyone out there is thinking of buying this whisky and they want to know some other things that are similar, I would definitely say Old Pulteney and unpeated Brookladdy as well. It's quite similar to this, so if you like those, definitely give a bottle of this a try. It is, as I say, made in a Scottish style, but it is also unmistakably a different product to Scotch, and it has some other things to offer. So, highly recommended, and I really look forward to an 18-year-old version of this. Cheers.